My son abandoned me at the departure gate, taking my wallet and phone, thinking I would just disappear on a flight path like an expired name. I split my cheap sandwich with a stranger, and just minutes later, security staff addressed him as Mr. Chairman. From that moment, the airport became a courtroom, and my family's secrets, along with a criminal conspiracy, were peeled back, layer by layer. My name is Eleanor Hart, though most just call me Ellie. I am 62 years old, a widow from the Midwest, and for 40 years, I was the senior treasurer at North Lake Foundry. I balanced books down to the penny. I thought I understood value. I was wrong. It was my son, Adam, who proposed the trip. He called it a healing vacation overseas, a chance for us to reconnect. Just him, his wife Sloane, and me. I had been hoping for this, for a sign that Sloane might finally see me as family, and not just the woman whose house Adam grew up in. I packed my best suitcase, the one I hadn't used since my husband passed. We arrived at Riverton International Airport before 9 in the morning. The main concourse was frantic, a sea of anxious travellers. Adam, ever so helpful, guided me toward the gleaming self-service kiosks. "Mum, the lines for the counter are awful," he said, his voice smooth as polished wood. "Let me just check you in here. It'll be faster if I use my app. Can I see your phone and your wallet? I just need your ID and that confirmation code I emailed you." Like a fool, I handed them over, my entire life, digitized and leather-bound, passed from my hand to his. "I'll just be right over there at that main board," he said, pointing vaguely. "Sloane is saving us a spot by the coffee shop. I'll get the baggage tags printed and meet you." He smiled. It was the smile he used when he was a boy, the one that meant he wanted something. Then he and Sloane simply melted into the crowd. I waited. I watched the departure board flip. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. They did not come back. I was stranded at the international departures gate, a ghost in a bustling terminal. I had no paper ticket, no boarding pass on an app I could not access. I had no driver's license, no credit cards. Adam had taken everything. I approached the airline counter, my voice trembling. "Ma'am, I have no identification. I cannot access my flight information." The young woman behind the desk recited, her eyes already looking past me. "There is nothing I can do without ID." I had nothing left but the clothes I was wearing and a small turkey sandwich I had packed from home, wrapped in wax paper inside my coat pocket. My stomach ached with hunger and a deeper, colder dread. I found an empty seat between a charging station and a trash receptacle. I sat down, the reality settling on me like concrete dust. Beside me, a middle-aged man in a simple blue polo shirt and worn trousers shifted. He looked tired, and I heard, quite clearly, his stomach rumble with hunger. I looked at him, then at the sandwich in my lap. I had spent 4 decades balancing ledgers, but this equation was simple. He was hungry. I had food. Without a word, I tore the sandwich in half and held out his portion on the wax paper. He looked startled. Then his eyes softened with genuine gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, accepting it. "You might have just saved me." We ate in the shared silence of the terminal. And then, the overhead speakers crackled to life, bypassing the automated boarding calls. Paging Barrington Air priority passenger, Mr. Graham Barrington. A cluster of uniformed staff hurried toward our seating area, their posture rigid with deference. They stopped directly in front of the man eating my sandwich. Mr. Barrington, the lead agent said, breathless. We have the car ready. Are you all right? The man, Graham Barrington, nodded slowly, brushing crumbs from his trousers. His eyes, which had been warm with gratitude, met mine. They were sharp now, analytical. He saw my rumpled coat, the terror I could no longer hide. I stammered, the words falling out. My son. He took my wallet. He took my phone. He left me here. His expression did not change, but the focus of his gaze intensified, as if he were looking at a complex problem he intended to solve. He stood up, the airline owner in his simple clothes, and offered me his hand. Come with me, he said. Graham did not lead me back into the chaos of the main terminal. Instead, he placed a steadying hand on my elbow and guided me toward an unmarked grey door, the kind flush with the wall, meant to be ignored. It opened with the electronic click of his security badge into a sterile white corridor, brightly lit and silent save for the hum of ventilation. We passed through 2 more security checkpoints. At the second, a guard looked at my face, then at the lack of any credentials, but Graham simply said, "She is my guest." And the guard buzzed us through. He brought me into a quiet operations center, a room pulsing with the quiet energy of dozens of monitors displaying security feeds from every corner of the airport. Ellie, this is Cara Dempsey, Graham said, indicating a woman in a crisp, dark blue uniform who was already watching us approach. She is the head of airport security for Riverton. Cara Dempsey had the focused, weary eyes of someone who spends her days solving problems she did not create. She was airport authority, not airline staff, and she looked at me with professional scrutiny. Mr. Barrington, what's the situation? This is Eleanor Hart, Graham said, his voice level. She was scheduled to fly internationally this morning. She believes her son and daughter-in-law have deliberately abandoned her here, taking her identification and communication. Cara's sharp gaze snapped to mine. Abandoned. That's a significant accusation. One I'd like you to investigate immediately, Graham replied, his tone polite but absolute. Terminal 4, Gate C Kiosk Bank, approximately 0900 this morning. Passenger Eleanor Hart. Cara turned to her console, her fingers moving with practiced speed. I have the flight, she confirmed. Barrington Air, 11:05 departure. But the check-in. She paused, her brow furrowing as she isolated the camera feeds from the kiosks. She rewound the footage. We watched the screen. There was Adam, my son, clear as day. He wasn't at a coffee shop. He was at the baggage claim, the arrivals carousel. He was pulling 2 large suitcases, my suitcase and his own, from the belt. Wait, I whispered, gripping the edge of the console. Those are our bags. Why is he getting them? We were checking in. Cara's eyes narrowed. She tracked his movement, her mouse clicking as she switched camera angles, following him past the customs exit and toward the ground transportation hub. Timestamp is 9:18, she narrated, her voice clipped and professional. He retrieves 2 pieces of luggage. He proceeds directly to the rideshare pickup zone. He and the woman, Sloane Avery, are in a car and exiting the terminal. Total time from when he left you to when he left the airport, 8 minutes. He never went near international departures. A cold sickness washed over me. But he checked me in, I insisted, my voice sounding thin. He used the kiosk. This, Cara said, pulling up a different data log, is where it gets technical. The system shows an attempt to check in Eleanor Hart at kiosk 42. The kiosk activated. We have the biometrics from the screen. She pointed. Fingerprints matching the reservation profile. Yours. See. I felt a small, desperate flicker of vindication. No, Kara said, stopping me cold. The check-in failed. The system requires a mandatory facial recognition scan to verify the passport ID on international flights. The face the camera captured did not match the name on the ticket. The face, Eleanor, was Sloane Avery's. I just stared, unable to process the logic. Why would Sloane use her face to check me in? Graham Barrington, who had been watching the screens silently, spoke. It's a digital disappearance tactic. Ellie, a sophisticated one. He turned to Kara. They create a failed check-in. The system registers the passenger's intent to fly, but the biometric mismatch voids the boarding pass. The passenger is flagged as a no-show. They have her wallet, her phone. She cannot be contacted. She is, in effect, erased. My hands began to shake. Why would they do this? To legitimize a claim, Graham said, his voice grim. If you vanish after a failed attempt to leave the country, you are officially missing. And a missing person, one who is unreachable, can be declared incapacitated. Incapacitated. The word echoed in my head, triggering a sudden, sickening memory. 6 months ago, I said, the words catching in my throat. Adam brought a man to the house, an appraiser, he said, just to see what the old place was worth, and he had me sign some papers. Kara and Graham looked at me. He said it was a temporary medical power of attorney, just a precaution. He said he was worried I might faint, that my blood pressure was high. He said it was just in case of an emergency. Kara was already typing again, her expression hardening. This wasn't random. The biometric override should have triggered an immediate alert and a security response. It was manually suppressed. She pulled the kiosk's internal access log. It was bypassed using an internal staff code. An employee? Graham asked. A contractor, Kara corrected, her eyes scanning the data. Marshall Pike, third-party logistics. He's already on an internal watch list. We suspect he's been selling VIP passenger data flight manifests, secure routes, weak spots in the system. It appears he just escalated from selling information to actively facilitating a crime. Graham Barrington stood to his full height, the easygoing traveller completely gone, replaced by the chairman of the board. He pulled out his own phone. Kara, preserve everything, he commanded. Every log, every frame of that footage. I want a complete incident report. Ellie, I am instructing my legal team to file an immediate report with the Glenford County Police. This is no longer a family dispute. This is a criminal conspiracy. I stood in the operations center, the hum of the servers a low thrum beneath my feet. The words Graham and Kara had used, incapacitated, digital disappearance, conspiracy, were sterile, technical terms for an act that felt like a burial. They were trying to erase me. My mind fled that cold room, travelling back 4 decades. I saw myself, a young woman working the night shift at the foundry, the smell of ozone and hot metal clinging to my clothes. I remembered sitting at our small apartment table, Frank sleeping in the next room, while I balanced our checkbook down to the last penny. Every overtime hour, every saved dollar, went into the account marked Maple Row. It took us 7 years to get the down payment. It was just a small brick bungalow, but it was ours. It was the only home Adam had ever known. When Frank passed, The silence in that house was deafening. Adam, then just starting his career, became my entire world, my reason for living. He was so bright, so impatient with the old ways I did things. "Mum, let me handle the utilities," he'd said one day, frustrated with my ledger books. "It's all online now. Just sign here. It's for convenience, so I can manage the accounts for you." So I signed. I didn't read the fine print. "Mum, this is just to authorize my email to get your bank statements," he'd said a year later. "It's easier for taxes." And I signed. Then came Sloane. She was beautiful, sharp, and polite in the way that ice is smooth. She never raised her voice, but her presence made me feel clumsy in my own home. I remember the day she suggested I move into the accessory apartment, the small suite we had built over the garage for when Frank's mother visited. "It's so much more private for you, Ellie," she'd said, her smile never reaching her eyes. "And it would give us the space to entertain properly." I was being neatly filed away. The investments started 6 months ago, right around the time Adam worried about my blood pressure and had me sign that temporary medical authorization. He said my savings were lazy, just sitting in a certificate of deposit. He promised high-yield returns, a way to secure my future. It meant more paperwork, a joint bank card. "Just in case you lose yours, Mom," an email authorization. The appraiser Adam brought to the house wasn't just seeing what it was worth. A cold, dreadful certainty settled in my stomach. Hart Avery Holdings, LLC. Hart. Avery. It wasn't a fund. It was a shell company. My son and his wife had used my convenience signatures to steal my home. Shame washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. I had let this happen. I had made myself small, retreating into the role of the aging, helpful mother, so that my son could feel large and capable. I had let him grow tall by feeding him my own roots, and now he had pulled the whole tree down. But as I gripped the edge of Kara's console, another thought cut through the fog of regret. I am a treasurer. I understand logic. I follow the numbers. And this didn't add up. Why this? Why the elaborate, public, and incredibly risky charade at an international airport? If they had the medical power of attorney they wanted, if they truly believed I was incapacitated, why not just incapacitate me? Why not put me in a home using the very papers I'd signed? The answer hit me with the force of a physical blow. Because they couldn't. Because I am not confused. I am not senile. I am 62 years old, and my mind is as sharp as it was balancing the Foundry's books. They knew that. They knew that if they tried to move me, if I saw the eviction notice, I would have fought them. I would have called the police. I would have hired a lawyer and torn their fraudulent paperwork to shreds in court. The abandonment at the airport wasn't the final act of the theft. It was a desperate, panicked attempt to create the evidence they needed to justify the theft they had already committed. They needed me to be a missing person, a confused old woman who wandered off, to make their incapacitated claim stick. They weren't just afraid I'd find out. They were afraid of me. The trembling in my hands stopped. The tears dried. I was no longer a victim crying on a bench. I was an asset that had been misappropriated. I wanted my house back. I wanted my savings back. But more than anything, I wanted my name. Eleanor Hart. Back on every single line where it belonged. Graham led me out of the Stark Operations Centre and back through the quiet corridors, this time ending at a set of frosted glass doors etched with the image of a soaring crane. The doors slid open silently, revealing the turquoise lounge. It was a world away from the plastic seats and linoleum floors of the terminal. Here, there was soft lighting, plush velvet chairs in deep blues and greys, and a silence so profound it felt like a sanctuary. "Just sit here. Ellie," Graham said gently, guiding me to a secluded alcove overlooking the tarmac. "We'll sort this out." A moment later, an attendant appeared, not asking what I wanted, but simply placing a steaming cup of tea on the polished wood table beside me. "Fresh ginger, ma'am. It's good for shock." I wrapped my cold hands around the porcelain cup. The warmth seeped into my fingers, and I took a sip. It was sharp and sweet. A young woman with the same focused, intelligent eyes as Graham approached, holding a slim tablet. She moved with a quiet efficiency that was both calming and formidable. "This is my daughter, Lila," Graham said, the pride in his voice unmistakable. "She runs the operations of this company. I just provide the sandwiches." Lila gave her father a small, fond smile before turning to me. Her expression was all business, but not unkind. "Mrs. Hart, I've taken the liberty of running a preliminary check based on the information you gave Kara." Her voice was soft, but quick. "Your home on Maple Row, the deed was transferred 8 weeks ago." I felt the cup rattle in its saucer. "Transferred how?" "To a limited liability corporation," Lila said, tapping the screen. "Hart Avery Holdings, LLC. The transfer was notarized by a Quentin Hale." She looked up. "Mr. Hale is currently under formal censure from the State Notary Board for, let's call them irregularities, in his paperwork. So, the house is just gone." "We'll get to that," Lila said, her gaze dropping back to the tablet. "More pressing is the flight. The international ticket in your name. It was booked 3 weeks ago." "But I didn't book it," I insisted. "I know," Lila said. "It was booked using your primary credit card. The card, I see, was added to a new Apple Pay account on a new device, Sloane Avery's device, just 1 day before the ticket was purchased. They used your own money to pay for the flight that would erase you. The meticulous, cruel planning of it all was suffocating. They hadn't just been impulsive, they had been methodical." Graham, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "Ellie, you are not fighting a family squabble. You are fighting a professional operation, and you cannot do it alone. You need a shark. I know a shark." I don't know," I stammered, the reality of my situation crashing in. My wallet was gone. My bank accounts were joint. My house was stolen. "A shark sounds expensive, Mr. Barrington. I have no money. I can't pay anyone." Graham was quiet for a moment. He looked at me, then at the empty wax paper from my pocket that I was still clutching in my lap, and he smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. "Ellie, I was on my way to a catering meeting where I was going to have to taste test 6 different kinds of dry-aged beef. You saved me from that. And I was starving. So let's consider this my payment for half a sandwich. The best turkey sandwich I've ever had." He turned to his daughter. "Lila, call Ruth Pennington. Tell her it's a code turquoise for me. Tell her she'll love this." Lila nodded, already moving away to make the call. "Ruth Pennington," Graham explained, "is the most terrifyingly thorough lawyer I have ever met. She's 80 years old, wears exclusively purple, and she has not lost a case against a scoundrel in 30 years. She's retired, but she keeps an office at Pennington and Rowe for special projects." He stood up. Lila is arranging a car. It will take you to a secure hotel we use for our flight crews during layovers. You will be a guest of the airline. There will be a change of clothes and a temporary phone waiting for you. Ruth will meet you there this afternoon. I stood up too, my legs shaky, but my spine straightening. Thank you. But there's one thing. Graham and Lila both looked at me. The lawyer, I said, my voice clear. When I sign the papers authorizing her to represent me, I'm reading every single word. No more just sign here for convenience. I'm giving her a limited power, just for this case. I expected them to be annoyed at the delay, at my sudden mistrust. Instead, Graham Barrington gave me a look of profound respect. Good, he said. That's the Ellie Hart I've been looking for. I met Ruth Pennington in the secure hotel room at 3:00 that afternoon. She was a woman in her 80s, dressed in a sharp lavender pantsuit, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. After I spent 20 minutes reading and finally signing the limited retainer every single word, she opened her briefcase. Let's get to work, she said, her voice a dry rasp. Lila Barrington's briefing was excellent. I've already confirmed the basics. Hart Avery Holdings, LLC. Sloane Avery is the managing member. Your son, Adam, is the sole beneficiary. They used it to take title to your home on Maple Row 8 weeks ago. She slid a certified copy of a document across the table. This, she said, is how they did it. It was a durable power of attorney, filed with the Densmore County Court. It granted Adam full authority over my finances and property, and it stated, in cold, black type, that the power was enacted due to my accelerated cognitive decline. I never signed that, I said, my voice shaking. My signature was at the bottom. But it was wrong. The E was too rigid, the tail of the T too short. It was a forgery. It's a competent one, but it wouldn't hold up to expert analysis, Ruth said, which is why they didn't rely on it alone. She produced a second document, this one on medical letterhead. They attached this a physician's assessment, signed by a Dr. Felix Dawn. I read the report. It claimed I had been examined 9 weeks ago and found to be disoriented, confused, and incapable of managing my own affairs. I've never heard of this man, I whispered. I have, Ruth replied, a grim satisfaction in her voice. Dr. Dawn's clinic has been investigated twice by the State Medical Board for signing fraudulent capacity assessments for cash. He's a pen for hire. This document is the cornerstone of their entire fraud. Ruth leaned forward, her sharp eyes holding mine. This is where they made their critical error. Their entire legal standing rests on the claim that you are incompetent. But Cara Dempsey at Riverton and Graham Barrington himself have just provided us with irrefutable, time-stamped proof that you are anything but. She tapped the temporary phone. I received the file an hour ago. Security footage of you navigating the terminal unassisted. Kiosk logs showing your attempt to check in, followed by Sloane's failed biometric scan. And sworn testimony from Mr. Barrington describing your rational conversation and your decision to share your food. They have built a legal case based on a lie, and we have the video evidence of the truth. Ruth's expression was predatory. Before I came here, I filed an emergency ex parte motion with the court to invalidate the DPOA based on clear fraud. I also requested an immediate freeze on all assets held by Hart Avery Holdings, LLC. And, because I believe in thoroughness, I have requested a temporary restraining order on the personal bank accounts of both Adam Hart and Sloane Avery. I was stunned by the speed. What happens now? Now, Ruth said. It gets bigger. While I was filing, Kara Dempsey was running the trace on her corrupt contractor, Marshall Pike. Ruth's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. As I suspected, Kara's team reviewed his communications. Pike wasn't just selling passenger names. He was selling specific vulnerabilities. He compiled lists of high-value, low-risk travelers, passengers over 60, traveling alone, with no one waiting at the other end. He sold these lists to an anonymous buyer. She paused, letting the implication settle. This wasn't just Adam and Sloane looking for an opportunity. They were customers. They bought a service. The pieces clicked together in my mind, cold and sharp, like tumblers in a lock. A service to make people disappear. Precisely, Ruth said. It's a sophisticated pipeline. The buyer uses a fraudulent DPOA to secure the assets, often homes. Then, they use Pike's data to select the perfect drop-off point, an airport, a bus terminal somewhere public and confusing. They stage an abandonment, just like yours. The no-show alert at the gate, combined with the fake doctor's report, creates the perfect narrative for the authorities. A confused elderly person has wandered off and is now missing. It's a way to silence the victim before they even know a crime has been committed. Your son and daughter-in-law didn't just stumble into this, Ellie. They bought into a conspiracy. Just then, Graham Barrington called Ruth's phone. She put it on speaker. Ruth, a heads up. Graham's voice came through. All business. My communications team is fielding calls from the press about the security breach. We are holding your client's name. Our official statement is that Barrington Air identified a security flaw and is cooperating fully with law enforcement regarding a potential case of elder exploitation. Your name will be kept out of it. Ellie? We will protect your privacy so Ruth can go on the attack. I looked at the forged signature on the stolen document. They hadn't just taken my house. They had tried to take my name, my mind, and my existence. They had paid to have me erased. The legal dam broke the next morning. Ruth Pennington worked with a speed that left me breathless. Before noon, she had our emergency motion in front of Judge Judith Klein. The combination of the fraudulent medical report and the airport's digital proof of my competence was explosive. Judge Klein immediately signed the order, freezing every asset associated with Hart Avery Holdings and both of my son's and Sloane's personal accounts. More importantly, she signed a search warrant for the offices of the notary, Quentin Hale. The police raid on Hale's dusty strip mall office was fast. They didn't just find sloppy paperwork. They found a USB flash drive tucked into a desk drawer. It was labeled Practice. On it, digital forensics recovered dozens of files containing scanned images of my name, Eleanor Hart, written over and over. They were practice sheets. The final, perfected forgery on that drive was a high-resolution, pixel-perfect match for the signature on the deed that stole my home. The second domino was Dr. Felix Dorn. Faced with the warrant, evidence of Hale's forgery, and the threat of losing his medical license permanently, he crumbled in less than an hour. He admitted to investigators that he had never met me. He had never examined me. He confessed he had signed the pre-written capacity assessment at the direct request of Sloane Avery, who had scheduled the consultation. His payment, he claimed, was not cash, but a generous equipment donation to his struggling clinic. The pressure found Adam immediately. My temporary phone rang that evening, displaying an unknown number. I answered, and my son's voice, thick with a desperate, hiccuping panic, poured out. Mom, Mom, thank God. I'm so sorry. This is all just a huge misunderstanding. Sloane, she pushed it. I never wanted this. Please. Mum, just meet me. Don't listen to them. Let me explain. Just you and me. I almost said yes. The part of me that was a mother ached to hear him. But Ruth, who was with me in the hotel room, saw my face, took the phone from my hand, and spoke into it. Mr. Hart, she said, her voice like gravel. This is Ruth Pennington, your mother's counsel. Do not contact her again. All future communication will go through my office or through the district attorney. She hung up. Sloane fought back, not with tears, but with venom. She hired a public relations firm. Suddenly, online gossip sites and local news aggregators began receiving anonymous tips. They painted me as an unstable, vindictive woman, prone to confusion and fantasies, who was being manipulated by an airline mogul. It was a good story. But Lila Barrington had a better one. She and Cara had been reviewing every second of my time in the terminal. They found footage from a concourse camera just moments before I was abandoned. A small, elderly woman, clearly frail, tripped over her own roller bag and fell hard. The video showed me immediately rushing to her, helping her to her feet, checking her for injuries, and staying with her until a medic arrived. Barrington Air's PR team reluctantly released the footage to the same media outlets Sloane had targeted. The narrative flipped instantly. I was no longer the confused woman. I was the good Samaritan. Lila wasn't done. With Adam's accounts frozen, the short-term rental on my Maple Row house defaulted on its payment. The tenant, a university student, contacted the LLC's email. Lila intercepted the correspondence. She discovered that Adam and Sloane had rented out my home the day after they stole it. Worse, the rental agreement, which Lila forwarded to Ruth, stipulated that all rent payments be made directly into a private, untraceable cryptocurrency wallet controlled by Sloane. Graham Barrington, seeing the public smear campaign, was furious. He informed Ruth he would no longer be a background resource. He would be a primary witness. He would testify in open court, under oath, about our entire encounter. From the moment I shared my sandwich to his assessment of my clear, rational, and lucid state of mind. The final piece landed that night. Cara Dempsey's team, working with the police, arrested Marshall Pike as he tried to wipe his work servers, facing federal charges for conspiracy and wire fraud. He asked for a deal. He told the district attorney everything. The buyers, he said, were just one arm of a much larger network. He supplied the data. But the real engine was a group of silent partners, a ring of complicit notaries and medical assessors, like Hale and Dawn, who identified and processed vulnerable targets. Quentin Hale wasn't just a rogue actor. He was a single, replaceable link in a chain. The courtroom was small and modern, with acoustic panels on the walls that seemed to soak up all the sound, leaving a heavy, pressurized silence. This was just the preliminary hearing, the stage setting, but it felt as suffocating as a sealed tomb. I sat bolt upright in the first row behind the prosecution table, beside Ruth. 2 rows back, on the other side, sat Adam and Sloane. I could feel the burn of their presence on my back. I refused to look. The prosecutor, Maya Ortiz, a sharp woman in a dark suit, stood to address the judge. Her voice was devoid of emotion, a clinical instrument. The state intends to prove this was a meticulous conspiracy, Ortiz said. Not a misunderstanding. We have recovered communications between the defendants from the morning of the abandonment. She held up a printed sheet, a certified copy of their text messages. At 9:18 in the morning, just as their vehicle was exiting the Riverton Airport garage, Mr. Hart sent a message to Ms. Avery, who was sitting next to him. The prosecutor paused, letting the silence in the room tighten. It reads, "Got Mom to go, no papers, no ticket. Done. Done." The word hung in the air, a cold, sharp-edged thing. Not, "She is on her way," or "I love you." Just done. The completion of a task, the disposal of a problem. I finally allowed myself to turn. I needed to see the face of the man who had typed that. I didn't see a monster. I saw my son, Adam. His face a sickly pale grey, his expensive suit hanging on him as if he had shrunk. He was staring at the floor, his hands twisting together. He wasn't evil incarnate. He was something almost worse. He was weak. A man so hollowed out by greed and fear that he had let this happen. That was the real, pathetic tragedy. He must have felt my eyes on him, because he looked up. His gaze was terrified, pleading. Then he turned, hissing at Sloane beside him. I could just make out the whisper, "This was all you. You pushed this." Sloane turned her head slowly to look at her husband. Her face was marble, absolutely serene, as if she were checking the time. Her eyes were empty of fear, anger, or love. She looked at him, the man she had conspired with, and replied in a low, clear voice that carried perfectly in the quiet room. "You signed." Adam flinched as if she had struck him. During the recess, as we stood in the hallway, their lawyer approached us. He was all smooth lines and practiced sympathy. "My clients are devastated by this misunderstanding," he began. Ruth cut him off. "Save it. What do you want?" "They are prepared to sign the house back over to your client, immediately," he said. "And, as a gesture of goodwill, they will add $50,000 for her. Inconvenience." I felt a flash of hot rage. Inconvenience? Ruth laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "My client isn't interested in your gesture. My client wants her name restored. She wants public justice. And she wants a criminal sentence. Now, unless your clients are prepared to offer a full guilty plea to all charges, you are wasting our time." The lawyer's smile vanished. He nodded stiffly and walked away. Back in the courtroom, Judge Klein, having reviewed the airport footage, the text messages, and the fraudulent medical reports, made her decision. Given the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution and the serious nature of the charges, specifically the exploitation of an elder, this court is fast-tracking this case. We will convene for trial in 3 weeks. The public, which had been energized by the Good Samaritan video, seized on the news. The local paper, the one Sloane had tried to manipulate, ran a front-page headline, "Abandoned Mom at Airport to Steal House Texts Reveal Done Plot." The tide of opinion was no longer just slanted. It was a tidal wave. That evening, Maya Ortiz and a detective met me and Ruth at the hotel. "Ellie," Ortiz said, "because of Marshall Pike's confession and your connection to this larger ring, you are no longer just a victim. You are a primary witness in a major federal case. We are formally offering you temporary placement in the Witness Protection Program." After they left, I sat in the quiet of the hotel room. The world was spinning. Witness protection. It was all so large, so far from my small life on Maple Row. I found a piece of hotel stationery, crisp and blank. I picked up the pen from the desk. My hand trembled slightly, but not from fear. It was from resolve. I wrote my name. Eleanor Hart. I looked at it. The forgery, the one they had practiced, was weak and unsteady. Mine was not. I wrote it again, and again. I filled the page with my name, the strokes of the pen digging into the paper, a ritual of reclamation. They had tried to turn me into a ghost, but I was still here, and I had my name. Marshall Pike's plea deal was the key that unlocked a door I never knew existed, revealing a darkness far larger than my stolen bungalow. In his confession to the U.S. attorney, he laid out the entire structure. He had been selling his curated lists of vulnerable passengers for over 2 years. His primary and most lucrative client was not a single individual, but an unscrupulous investment firm called the Alabaster Ridge Group. Their sole business model, he claimed, was the predatory acquisition of real estate from elderly owners. My case was just one of dozens. The investigation, now a joint effort between the state police and federal authorities, expanded with terrifying speed. They found that Quentin Hale, the notary, was more than just a forger. He was a regional coordinator. He provided Alabaster Ridge with lists of other low-risk notaries across 3 states, professionals willing to look the other way or actively participate in faking documents for a percentage of the take. And Dr. Felix Dorn, the man who declared me incompetent, received his equipment donation not from Sloan, but from a shell corporation called the Silver Lattice Foundation. Investigators quickly identified this foundation as the primary money laundering channel for Alabaster Ridge, washing the profits from their stolen properties. But it was Ruth who found the most painful connection. Buried in the discovery documents was a chain of emails recovered from Sloane's laptop. It turned out my daughter-in-law had worked as a short-term consultant for Alabaster Ridge 9 months ago, just before she and Adam proposed the investment plan to me. In one email, Sloane was pitching her value to the firm. She wrote, "The current acquisition models are too aggressive. We need a softer, more legally sound approach." Then she laid out a plan that was sickeningly familiar. It involved building a file of cognitive decline before an asset was ever approached. And in the final, chilling email, she offered them a test subject. "My mother-in-law is the perfect standard model. She has sole ownership, is trusting, and her son has her complete confidence. We can use her as the template for the entire incapacitation pipeline. My life, my home, my trust. It was all just a standard model for her portfolio." The news broke wide, and the scandal rocked the state. Graham Barrington, seeing the scope of the conspiracy, made a public move. He held a press conference. He announced that Barrington Air would be funding a multi-million-dollar legal aid fund, managed by an independent ethics board, to provide representation for any other victims of Alabaster Ridge who came forward. In exchange, his company would receive the rights to publish a comprehensive, anonymized report on the loopholes in transportation and finance that allowed this to happen, effectively turning our nightmare into an industry-wide transparency mandate. Cara Dempsey, now heading the governor's new task force on elder exploitation, held her own briefing. She confirmed that Marshall Pike's data showed a clear pattern. The drop-off points were almost never major hubs like Riverton. They were small, regional airports and interstate bus terminals, places with minimal security cameras and overworked staff, where a confused senior citizen disappearing would barely register. Amidst this storm, Ruth Pennington sat with me in the new, more secure hotel I had been moved to. Ellie, she said. Alabaster Ridge has dozens of victims, all with cases in limbo. Their lawyers will try to bury us in paperwork, bleed us dry one by one. But your case is different. It's clean. We have the video, the audio, the text messages, and a direct link to the perpetrators. It is the perfect test case. She proposed a new strategy. She would file a motion to separate my civil suit from the larger group, to have it tried first. We use your case as the spear, she explained. When we win, and we will win, it sets the precedent. It breaks them financially and legally, opening the door for a massive class action lawsuit for everyone else. I was the standard model. Now I would be the test case. The irony was bitter. I'll do it, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I will be the test case, but I have one condition. This isn't about me anymore. It's about them. All the legal filings, all the press releases from your side, the names of every other victim, all those other people on their lists, are to be protected. Absolutely. They have been violated enough. They will not be put on trial in the news. Ruth Pennington looked at me, and for the first time, I saw her smile with genuine warmth. That, she said, is a condition I will be proud to honor. The final day of the trial was a blur of calculated, precise strikes. Maya Ortiz, the prosecutor, stood before the judge, her presentation as clean and sharp as a scalpel. She didn't rely on emotion. She built an unassailable fortress of logic. The case is simple, Your Honor, she began, pacing slowly. It is a four-step conspiracy. First, the defendants forged a durable power of attorney, utilizing the criminal services of a compromised notary, Quentin Hale, and a fraudulent medical assessment from a discredited physician, Dr. Felix Dorn, to legally declare the victim incapacitated. She clicked to the next slide. Second, they used this fraudulent document to illegally transfer the victim's primary asset, her home of 40 years, into their own private shell corporation, Hart Avery Holdings, LLC. Another click. Third, to prevent their victim from discovering this theft, they had to silence her. They lured her to Riverton International Airport under the pretense of a healing vacation. There, they stole her identification, her phone, and her money. And fourth, Ortiz concluded, her voice ringing with finality, they staged a failed international check-in, using the wrong biometric data, specifically to trigger a no-show alert. This act was designed to create a false narrative for law enforcement that Eleanor Hart, the woman they had already declared incapacitated, had simply wandered off. They were not just stealing her house, they were engineering her disappearance. The evidence followed, relentless and crushing. A digital forensics expert showed the court the USB drive recovered from Quentin Hale's office, displaying the dozens of practice signatures of my name. A certified handwriting analyst took the stand and pointed to 12 distinct inconsistencies between my real signature and the forgery on the deed. Then came the airport video of me helping the fallen woman, the kiosk logs showing Sloane's face, Marshall Pike's detailed confession, the text message from Adam to Sloane. Got Mum to go. No papers, no ticket. Done. And finally, the cryptocurrency statements from Sloane's wallet showing 2 months of rent collected on my house. The defense attorney, looking strained, made one last attempt. Your Honor, he argued, at its heart, this is a tragic family dispute, a disagreement over assets that went too far. Judge Klein cut him off, her voice sharp. A family dispute. Counselor, does a family dispute typically involve federal wire fraud, conspiracy with a known data broker, and a network of corrupt notaries? The court sees the evidence of organized crime. Your objection is noted and overruled. The prosecution's final witness was Graham Barrington. He walked to the stand, wearing a simple dark suit, looking like any other citizen. "Mr. Barrington," Ortiz asked, "can you describe your first encounter with the victim?" He looked directly at the jury, and then at me. "I was in the terminal," he said, his voice quiet, drawing the entire room into a hush. "I was on my way to a meeting, and I was hungry. This woman, who I had never met, was sitting beside me. She was clearly in distress. She had almost nothing, but she saw that I was hungry, and she took the sandwich she was holding, tore it in half, and offered one half to me." He paused, letting the simplicity of the act settle. We spoke. She was not confused. She was not disoriented. She was terrified. She was rational, and she was articulate. She was a woman who had been abandoned, and she was asking for help. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Before the judge could call for a recess, Adam suddenly stood up, shoving his lawyer's restraining hand away. "Your Honor, I want to say something." Judge Klein nodded. Adam turned, not to the judge, but to me. His face was blotchy, his eyes streaming with tears. "Mom," he choked out. I admit it. I let the money. I let it daze me. I was weak. I was scared. I never wanted any of this. I am so sorry. Please, Mom, please, forgive me." The silence returned, heavier this time, waiting. The prosecutor looked at me, giving me the floor. I stood slowly, my hands clasped in front of me. I did not look at Adam. I looked only at Judge Klein. "I did not come here today because I want to see my son in prison," I said, my voice steady. "I am not here for revenge." I took a breath. "I am here because they tried to steal my name. They tried to declare my mind invalid. I am here because the truth matters. I want the truth to be put back in its rightful place." Judge Klein held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded, her expression grim. "This court has heard the testimony and seen the evidence, which I find to be overwhelming," she declared. "A verdict and sentence for the defendants, Hart and Avery, will be read following a short recess." She raised her gavel, but did not strike it. "But first, based on the extensive, verified evidence provided in this trial, specifically the testimony linking the defendants to the Silver Lattice Foundation and the Alabaster Ridge Group, this court is, effective immediately, issuing new felony warrants for the principal partners of Alabaster Ridge for conspiracy, racketeering, and systemic elder fraud." We were standing in the hallway during the recess, waiting for the final sentencing, when Prosecutor Maya Ortiz's phone began to vibrate, a frantic, insistent buzz on the table. She looked at the screen, and her professional calm evaporated. She grabbed Ruth's arm. "That was Cara Dempsey at Riverton. We have an escalation. Right now." A high-priority security alert had just triggered at the private executive terminal, Sloan Avery, using a credit line tied to a shell corporation formed just 2 days ago, had chartered a private jet. She wasn't just planning an appeal, she was fleeing the jurisdiction. Ruth was instantly on the phone with Graham Barrington. "Graham, she's running," Ruth said, her voice a low, urgent command. "Riverton, executive tarmac. She's booked a flight. Graham's response was not verbal. It was immediate. As the head of Barrington Air and a key member of the Aviation Alliance, he triggered a code red high-risk alert, blacklisting the charter company and the tail number across the entire national flight network, grounding the flight for immediate security review. At the same moment, Cara Dempsey's airport security unit, already on high alert, raced across the tarmac. The small jet was already taxiing, turning toward the runway. Cara, in her own vehicle, raced ahead, her lights flashing, physically blocking the entrance to the main runway. The departure gate, this time, was slammed shut in Sloane's face. Police officers boarded the plane at the jet bridge. They found Sloane in the cabin. Her marble composure finally cracked, her face pale with fury. In her open carry-on bag, sitting right on top, was my passport. The one Adam had taken from me at the terminal. She had kept it, a final, necessary tool for her disappearance. Judge Klein was furious. We were recalled to the courtroom immediately. Sloane was marched back in, this time in handcuffs, flanked by 2 armed officers. "It seems, Ms. Avery," Judge Klein said, her voice trembling with contained rage, "that you are incapable of not committing a crime, even while awaiting sentencing for one. The court adds 2 additional felony charges to your docket: obstruction of justice and felony identity theft for the possession of the victim's passport." This was the final blow. Adam, who had been sitting grey-faced, let out a sound, a deep, wounded animal noise. He physically collapsed, slumping forward in his chair as if his spine had been removed. His lawyer, seeing his client completely broken, stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, his voice flat and defeated. "My client, Adam Hart, wishes to change his plea to guilty on all counts. He agrees to cooperate fully with the federal investigation into the Alabaster Ridge Group, and he will sign over all contested assets, effective immediately." Judge Klein looked at Sloane, at Adam, and then at me. She delivered the sentence for her meticulous planning, her lack of remorse, and her blatant attempt to flee. Sloane Avery was sentenced to the maximum term in state prison for his role, his confession, and his cooperation. Adam received a suspended sentence, 10 years of probation, and 4,000 hours of mandatory community service at an elder care legal aid center. The judgment was final, full and immediate restitution of all funds, and the court ordered restoration of the name Eleanor Hart to the deed of the house on Maple Row and all associated accounts. It was over. I stood up, the tension draining out of me, leaving only a profound quiet. Ruth squeezed my arm, and I walked out of the courtroom. The courthouse lobby was vast and cold, the floor polished stone, and my footsteps echoed, just as they had at the airport. I walked slowly, letting the new reality settle, and then I stopped. Directly in front of me, pointing toward the main doors, was a large, polished, brass sign. It read, "Departures." I stared at it. This was the place. The symbol of where I was meant to be discarded, the gate to my erasure. I felt a presence beside me. It was Graham Barrington. He had followed me out. He stood next to me, saying nothing, just looking at the sign with me. After a long moment, I turned my back to the sign. I turned and began walking in the opposite direction, toward the other side of the lobby, toward the doors I had first entered, toward the sign that read, "Arrivals." Graham walked beside me, in complete silence. The half sandwich I had given to a stranger, a simple act of decency, had become my honor guard. I reached the heavy glass doors and pushed. As I stepped out into the clean, bright air, the door's hydraulic mechanism caught, pulling it shut behind me. The heavy thud of the door settling into its frame echoed across the stone plaza, sharp and decisive, like the final, satisfying strike of a judge's gavel. The knot was untied, right where the betrayal had begun. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I really want to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop a comment below so we can connect and you can share your thoughts. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help others find it and hear this message.